Before I sign anything, Sebastian Vale said, sliding the gold pen away from my brother, I need someone to explain why the woman sitting at the end of this table mortgaged her own house to make your payroll 3 years ago. The room went so quiet I could hear the air vent rattling above the conference windows. My brother Grant stopped smiling. My mother's hand tightened around her water glass. The attorney on our side looked down so fast it was almost a confession. And me? I just stared at Sebastian, because I had never told him that. I had never told anyone outside the family bank. Not about the second mortgage. Not about the nights I sat on my kitchen floor wondering whether I'd lose my home to keep Whitfield Components alive. Not about the promise my father made me before he died. So how did the billionaire buying my brother's company know? If you're enjoying stories about real-life challenges, personal growth, and unforgettable life lessons, consider subscribing to the channel. New stories are released regularly, and you won't want to miss the next one. My name is Nora Whitfield. I was 34 years old that day, the operations director of Whitfield Components in Lexington, Kentucky, though titles in my family never meant much unless they belonged to my brother. Grant was 39, the golden oldest son, the face of the company, the one my mother called your father's legacy even when my father was still alive. Me, they called the spare daughter. It started as a joke when I was little. Grant was the heir, I was the backup. The extra child. The one who was so capable she didn't need protecting, celebration, or much of anything, really. If Grant won a baseball trophy, we went out to dinner. If I got straight A's, my mother smiled and said, "That's nice, Nora." Reliable as always. Reliable. Capable. Spare. By the time I was old enough to understand what that meant, the name had already sunk into my bones. I lived in a narrow brick house on the south side of Lexington, alone after a divorce I still didn't talk about much. My ex-husband, Daniel, used to say loving my family company was like being married to a fire. It never stops needing oxygen, he told me the night he left. And you keep feeding it your life. He wasn't wrong. Whitfield Components manufactured specialty metal housings for medical equipment and high-end refrigeration systems. It wasn't glamorous, but it was solid. Or it had been when my father ran it. He understood machines, margins, and people. He knew the names of welders' children and which forklift squeaked in the loading dock. He built the company over 32 years and believed hard work fixed almost everything. Then pancreatic cancer took him in 11 months. The day after his funeral, Grant moved into Dad's office. The week after that, our mother started referring to Grant as the natural successor, like there had been a vote. There hadn't. I had been running operations for 6 years by then. I'd modernized our inventory system, renegotiated freight contracts, and built the supplier relationships that kept us alive during the pandemic. When steel prices shot up and customers delayed payments, I was the one who sat with bankers and found breathing room. When a machine broke at 2 a.m., the plant manager called me, not Grant. Grant was good in a room. He was competent, polished, and blessed with the kind of smile that made people hand him second chances before he asked for them. He could charm investors, toast clients, and talk about growth like it was a religion. But he hated details. He hated bad news. And worst of all, he hated anyone noticing that without me, he'd have been a CEO with nothing to stand on. So he did what men like Grant do when a woman makes them feel small. He called me difficult. He said I lacked vision. He smiled in meetings and introduced me as my sister Nora, the backbone of the boring stuff. Everyone laughed, and I smiled because if I didn't, I'd be accused of making things awkward. What no one knew was that 3 years earlier, when Grant almost drove the company into default with a reckless warehouse expansion we couldn't afford, the bank had given us 48 hours to come up with collateral or lose our operating line. My father had already been sick. Grant panicked. My mother cried. The attorney told us there wasn't much to be done. So I signed. I leveraged my house to secure payroll for 118 employees. My father sat in the hospital 2 days later, fingers thin and yellow against the blanket, and cried when I told him. "I'll make this right," he whispered. I believed him. But then he died. And somehow, right after probate, that promise disappeared along with a lot of other things no one wanted to explain. Now here I was, a year later, in our conference room while Grant prepared to sell the company to Sebastian Vale for a number so large it made my stomach turn. $400 million. That was the figure being passed around like a trophy, as if it proved Grant had become something bigger than our father ever was. I hadn't been included in the early meetings. That alone told me something was wrong. When I finally got access to the data room, I found missing disclosures, rushed valuations, and debt schedules that looked cleaner than reality had any right to be. I flagged concerns. Grant told me I was being emotional. My mother told me not to sabotage your brother's moment. Then Sebastian Vale flew in on a gray Thursday morning, stepped into our building with that unnerving stillness rich men sometimes have, and blew the whole room apart with one question. Grant recovered first. That loan was temporary, he said with a practiced laugh. Family support during a rough patch. Sebastian didn't look at him. He kept his eyes on me. Was it temporary, Ms. Whitfield? I should have lied. God knows it would have made my life easier. But I'd spent too many years swallowing truth until it tasted like blood. No, I said. It's still attached to my house. Grant's jaw flexed. My mother closed her eyes like I'd embarrassed her. Sebastian leaned back in his chair. Then we also need to discuss why that obligation wasn't clearly disclosed as a contingent liability tied to key person operational continuity. Our attorney finally spoke. It was not legally. It was materially relevant, Sebastian cut in. Especially since every diligence memo my team received credits Grant Whitfield with the turnaround that apparently depended on his sister risking personal foreclosure. Grant shoved his chair back. Are we buying a company or conducting family therapy? Sebastian's expression didn't change. At this point, I'm trying to determine whether I'm being sold a company, a performance, or a fraud. No one moved. I should tell you something about humiliation. It doesn't always come when someone insults you. Sometimes it comes when a stranger tells the truth in a room where your own family never has. The meeting adjourned 20 minutes later without signatures. Grant cornered me in the hallway the second Sebastian and his team stepped out. What did you tell them? He hissed. Nothing. Which is exactly why you should be nervous. You always do this, he snapped. Anytime something big happens, you need to remind everyone you exist. I laughed then, an ugly little sound I didn't recognize as mine. I mortgaged my house so you could keep pretending to be Dad. His face went red. You think you're the only one who sacrificed? Before I could answer, my mother stepped between us in a navy silk blouse that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. Enough, she said sharply, but her eyes were on me. Do not ruin this out of bitterness. There it was. Always the same accusation. If I wanted fairness, I was bitter. If I wanted credit, I was jealous. If I told the truth, I was attacking the family. Grant walked away first, straightening his cuffs like he'd already recovered. My mother followed him. I stood alone in the hallway until I heard a quiet voice behind me. Ms. Whitfield? It was Sebastian's chief counsel, a woman named Priya Shah. Mr. Vale would like 10 minutes of your time. Privately. I almost said no. Men like Sebastian Vale didn't become billionaires by caring about overlooked daughters from Kentucky. But curiosity is a dangerous thing when you've spent years starving for answers. He was waiting in the smaller boardroom downstairs, jacket off, sleeves rolled once. Up close, he looked less like a magazine cover and more like someone who'd learned not to waste movement. I'm not here to rescue you, he said before I even sat down. Good. I don't need rescuing. One corner of his mouth almost moved. That answer is exactly why I asked to speak with you. He slid a folder across the table. Inside were copies of banking covenants, internal memos, and one email I had never seen before. It was from our outside attorney to Grant, marked 6 months earlier. Need Nora's historical loan instrument buried in appendix. Will spook buyer if emphasized. My hands went cold. You knew, I said. I knew something was being hidden, Sebastian replied. Then I asked who had operational authority during the years your brother claimed growth leadership. Your name kept coming up. Plant manager. Controller. Suppliers. Even the janitor knew who actually ran the place. Heat rose behind my eyes, but I refused to cry in front of him. Then why keep dealing with Grant? Because sometimes the fastest way to expose a structure is to let people think it can hold one more floor. I stared at him. Why are you telling me this? Because I don't buy companies unless I know where the truth lives. And in your family, everyone flinches when I say your name. That should have felt satisfying. Instead, it made me feel sick. He folded his hands. There's another problem. My team found reference to a trust amendment tied to governance on sale or incapacity. It should exist. We haven't seen it. I looked up so fast my chair scraped. A trust amendment? Yes. It may be nothing. It may be clerical. But your father's estate file has gaps. My pulse started pounding in my ears. My father's promise came back to me so vividly I could smell hospital antiseptic. I'll make this right. What exactly did it say? I asked. We only found mention of it in correspondence with First Commonwealth Bank. No full copy. Who has the correspondence? Bank Counsel archived it. They won't release more without legal process. And you're telling me this because if your brother concealed material documents, the deal is dead anyway. And because I suspect you've been trained to accept less than what's yours. I left that room shaking. Not because a billionaire had taken my side. He hadn't. He'd taken the truth's side, which is rarer and usually more dangerous. That night I drove to my Aunt Denise's house outside Georgetown. She was my father's younger sister, the one my mother called dramatic because Denise had a habit of noticing things out loud. If our family had a patron saint of inconvenient honesty, it was Aunt Denise. She opened the door in house slippers and one look at my face made her step aside. What did they do now? By midnight, we had my father's old storage boxes spread across her dining room table. Tax returns. Board packets. Treatment receipts. Handwritten notes in his blocky, mechanical pencil print. I was halfway into a carton labeled personal when Denise pulled out a yellow legal envelope. It had my father's handwriting across the front. For Nora, if necessary. My hands trembled so badly I could barely open it. Inside was a letter, dated 3 weeks before he died. Nora, if you're reading this, then either I waited too long or they did exactly what I feared. Your brother wants the title. Your mother wants peace. Neither understands that peace built on dishonesty is just delayed damage. You carried this company when I no longer could. If Whitfield Components is sold, merged, or restructured, controlling voting rights transfer to you under the amendment I signed with Tully and First Commonwealth. I made this decision because leadership is not inheritance. It is stewardship. If the amendment is missing, do not assume it was lost. My vision blurred. There were 3 more pages. He wrote about Grant's impatience, about my tendency to make myself smaller to keep the family intact, about his shame that he'd let the heir and spare joke become something crueler than he admitted. The last line nearly broke me. I should have corrected them sooner. You were never the spare. You were the safeguard. I cried so hard I couldn't breathe. Aunt Denise came around the table and held me the way no one had since I was a child. She didn't offer easy words. She just stayed there while 30 years of being second collapsed under the weight of one honest sentence. But the letter wasn't enough. It referenced the amendment, not the document itself. And men like Grant didn't surrender to tears and stationery. The next morning I called First Commonwealth. By noon I was sitting across from Marlene Reyes, the retired commercial banker who'd handled our account before cancer took my father and early retirement took her. She remembered me immediately. "You're the daughter who came prepared," she said. "Your brother always came charming." I showed her the letter. Marlene read it twice, then exhaled slowly. "I can't give you archived trust documents without proper process. But I can tell you this much. Your father changed the control provisions because the bank insisted on governance protection after that warehouse disaster. He told us, and I quote, 'My son wants to own it. My daughter knows how to keep it alive.'" My throat tightened. "Then where is it?" She hesitated. "Last I saw, your family attorney had the executed copy. James Tully. The same attorney who had buried my mortgage in an appendix." I drove straight to his office. He made me wait 40 minutes, probably hoping I'd cool off. I didn't. When he finally came out, smiling that smooth, expensive smile, I put my father's letter on his desk. "I want the amendment." His face barely moved. "I'm not sure what you're referring to." "That's a lie. Nora. Don't Nora me." My voice shook, but I didn't lower it. "You helped probate my father's estate. You watched my brother step into control. You watched me sign board consents based on incomplete information. If there was an amendment and you buried it, this stops being a family misunderstanding and becomes something else." For the first time, he looked uncertain. Then he made the mistake that ended him. He said, "Your mother believed this arrangement was best for everyone." I went still. "Not Grant. My mother." The air in the room changed shape. Tully realized too late what he'd admitted. He began retreating into legal language, but I was already out the door, heart pounding so hard it hurt. "I found my mother at the house I grew up in, arranging flowers for a charity lunch like the world wasn't splitting open." "Did you hide Dad's amendment?" I asked. She didn't turn around right away. She just adjusted a white hydrangea and said, "You came in without knocking." "Did you hide it?" She set the stem down carefully. "Your father was medicated. Emotional. He was making reactive decisions." I felt something in me go cold and clean. "That's a yes." She faced me then, and for the first time in my life, I didn't see elegance. I saw fear. "He was handing control to you in a moment of illness," she said. "Your brother had spent his whole life believing this company would be his responsibility. And I spent mine doing the responsibility. You don't understand what it's like to raise a son who feels constantly judged by his father." I stared at her. "Are you hearing yourself? He needed this, Nora." I laughed in disbelief. "So you stole it from me?" "I protected the family." "No. You protected the story you preferred." Her mouth tightened. "You were always independent. You could survive disappointment." That line hurt more than the theft. Not because it was cruel. Because it explained everything. Every Christmas when Grant got what he wanted and I got what was practical. Every meeting where I got work and he got applause. Every time I was expected to understand because I was strong. She had mistaken my ability to endure neglect for permission to keep giving it. "I almost lost my house for this company," I said quietly. "I know. Did you?" Her eyes flickered. That was answer enough. Grant had told her. Maybe all along. I left before I said something unforgivable, but not before she called after me, "If you blow this up, everyone will suffer. The employees. Your nephew. Your brother's children." I turned at the front door. "The truth didn't create this mess, Mom. You just got used to blaming the wrong person." By Friday, the war was open. Grant fired me by email. Not for cause, of course. Strategic restructuring during transaction period. Cowardly, polished language. He also restricted my system's access and told department heads all external communication should go through him. An hour later, one of our controller's assistants forwarded me something she thought I should see. It was an internal transfer schedule tied to a shell company called Blue Aster Holdings. Over 18 months, millions had been moved out in consulting fees. The shell traced to a downtown office suite used by Grant's divorce attorney. That's when the second layer snapped into focus. Grant wasn't just selling the company for glory. He was trying to convert a liquid business value into personal cash before his wife's divorce case forced forensic disclosure. He was draining the company, hiding the debt, burying governance documents, and gambling that I would keep doing what I'd always done, absorb the damage quietly. Instead, I called Sebastian. He answered on the second ring. I found the motive, I said. He was silent for one beat. Where are you? Parked outside a Walgreens, trying not to drive my car through my brother's front door. I'll send Priya. Don't move. Over the next 72 hours, my life became conference calls, affidavits, archived emails, and a kind of exhaustion so deep it made time feel grainy. Priya connected me with litigation counsel. Marlene provided sworn background about the bank's governance requirement. Aunt Denise found one more thing in my father's storage box, a flash drive. On it was a video file. My father sat in his office, thinner than I remembered, looking directly into the camera. If you're watching this, he said, voice rough, then somebody decided paper was easier to disappear than conscience. He spoke for 11 minutes. About the amendment. About my loan. About Grant's weak judgment and my mother's denial. But he also said something I didn't expect. I love my son. He is not evil. He is scared. Scared he is not enough unless the world keeps telling him he is. That fear makes him dangerous when power is within reach. That was my father. Even in disappointment, he searched for the human fracture underneath the wrongdoing. The hearing for the emergency injunction was set for Tuesday morning. If the judge granted temporary relief, the sale would freeze pending review of governance and financial misconduct. If not, Grant could try to force closing fast. The courthouse smelled like old paper and rain-soaked coats. Grant looked immaculate. My mother looked pale. James Tully looked like a man reconsidering several career choices. I took the stand first. I testified about the mortgage, the payroll crisis, my operational role, the missing amendment, and the concealed transfers. Grant's attorney tried to paint me as resentful, unstable, and motivated by sibling rivalry. I answered every question with the kind of calm that comes when humiliation has burned all the panic out of you. Then they put Grant up. He denied intent. Denied concealment. Denied knowing about the amendment's significance. He said Blue Aster was a temporary asset protection vehicle recommended during marital uncertainty. Did you disclose those transfers to the buyer? My attorney asked. They were under review. That's not an answer. Grant glanced toward our mother. It was small. Most people would have missed it. I didn't. Then the video played. You could feel the courtroom change. My father's voice filled the room, steady and tired and impossible to interrupt. When he said, Nora kept this company alive when the rest of us were busy preserving appearances, I saw Grant's shoulders cave for the first time in my life. My mother started crying quietly beside her attorney. The judge granted the injunction before lunch. Sale frozen. Emergency receiver appointed over disputed transactions. Independent review ordered. Temporary governance suspended pending determination of control. It should have felt like victory. Instead, it felt like standing in the wreckage of the only language my family had ever spoken. That evening, I went back to the plant alone. Second shift was on, sparks flashing blue-white behind welding curtains. The place smelled like oil, hot metal, and memory. Eddie from shipping saw me and pulled off his gloves. You okay, boss? I almost corrected him. Then I didn't. Working on it. He nodded toward the floor. People are scared. I know. You staying? That question hit harder than all the legal ones. Because underneath the betrayal, underneath the rage, there was still this company. These people. Families who depended on paychecks. Men and women who had shown up for Whitfield components even when Whitfield blood had failed them. I don't know yet, I admitted. Eddie shrugged. For what it's worth, most of us figured you were the one keeping the lights on. That simple sentence nearly undid me more than any speech. The second twist came 2 days later, and it wasn't from Grant. It was from Sebastian. He asked me to meet at the plant conference room after hours. Priya was there, along with 2 members of his diligence team. I walked in bracing for bad news. I'm withdrawing the acquisition as structured, Sebastian said. I stared at him. After all this? After all this because of all this. I won't buy a poisoned structure built on hidden transfers and fractured authority. Anger flashed through me so fast I surprised myself. So that's it? You ask one question, set off a bomb, and leave? His gaze held mine. No. I'm offering something different. Priya slid a term sheet across the table. Equity investment. Operational recapitalization. Governance reset. Majority control retained by Nora Whitfield, contingent on court confirmation of the amendment and board restructuring. I read it twice. You want me to run it? I want to back the person who already has. I shook my head slowly. Why? Sebastian gave the only answer that mattered. Because your father built a company. You built a system. Those are harder to find. The room went quiet. I didn't say yes that night. I went home and sat on my porch until nearly midnight, listening to cicadas and thinking about what my life might look like if I stopped defining myself by what I could survive. My house. My marriage. My family. My role. For so long I had been reacting to other people's hunger. I didn't know what choosing for myself even sounded like. Then my phone rang. Grant. I almost let it go. Almost. But some endings only come if you answer them. He was at the hospital with chest pain brought on by what doctors gently called acute stress and everyone else would call finally meeting consequences. When I arrived, he looked smaller than I had ever seen him. You came, he said. I almost didn't. He laughed once, then winced. Fair. We sat in silence for a minute. Finally he said, Dad was never going to pick me, was he? I looked at my brother, the charming boy who became a man by borrowing admiration he never learned to earn, and for the first time, I didn't feel just anger. I felt grief. He wanted you to become someone who didn't need picking, I said. Grant covered his eyes with one hand. I thought if I closed the deal, everything would finally make sense. The debt. The divorce. Mom telling me I was carrying the family. I just needed one win. You were draining the company. I know. You let me lose everything while you called me bitter. His hand fell away. His eyes were red. I know. That didn't fix anything. Some apologies arrive too late to become healing. But truth, even late, has a strange mercy to it. At least it stops the lie from growing. The final confrontation came at the special board and shareholder meeting 2 weeks later, held in our largest assembly space because too many employees wanted to witness it from the floor above. Lawyers lined the walls. Reporters had somehow gotten wind of it. The air felt electric. My mother asked to speak before the vote. I hadn't known she would. Caroline Whitfield stood at the podium in cream silk and pearls, every inch the composed matriarch, until she started talking. I spent years believing I was protecting my family, she said, voice shaking. What I was really protecting was a hierarchy I understood. My son inherited expectation. My daughter inherited burden. I called one of them pressure and the other one strength, and I used that as an excuse to be unfair. No one moved. She looked at me then, not around me, not past me. At me. I hid the amendment. I told myself your father was sick and that I knew better. The truth is, I was afraid. Afraid Grant would collapse if he lost what he thought was his. Afraid the family would split. And because you had always endured pain quietly, I made the unforgivable choice of assuming you could endure one more wound. My throat closed. I was wrong, she said. And I am sorry. It didn't erase what she'd done. But hearing her name the wound out loud felt like watching a locked room finally open. Then came the vote. Tully resigned before he could be removed. Grant stepped down under agreement, later entering a restitution and compliance arrangement tied to the divorce and financial review. He kept access to his children, but not through charm anymore. Through accountability. It was the first honest work of his adult life. The court confirmed the amendment 30 days later. Controlling interest transferred to me exactly as my father intended. And after 3 sleepless nights, I signed Sebastian's revised deal. Not a sale. A partnership. We refinanced the toxic debt, paid off the loan tied to my house, restructured leadership, and created an employee profit-sharing program that should have existed years earlier. I promoted people who had been doing invisible excellence for too long. Funny how easily I recognized them. My mother sold the big house and moved into a smaller place near downtown. We are not magically healed. Real life doesn't work like that. Some apologies become bridges. Others become boundaries with manners. We have coffee now. Sometimes we even laugh. But I no longer shrink so she can feel comfortable. That version of me is gone. As for Grant, recovery made him quieter. Less polished. More real. He once told me outside family court, "I don't know who I am if I'm not the son everybody bet on." I said, "Maybe that's your chance." He nodded like it hurt. A year after the injunction, I stood on the plant floor during our annual employee gathering, looking out at welders, machinists, managers, drivers, and accountants. People who knew exactly how much can break before something either collapses or gets rebuilt right. I told them the truth. Not every legal detail. Not every betrayal. Just the part that mattered. This company survived because a lot of people did the work without getting the credit, I said. That ends now. They applauded, and somewhere above the noise I thought of my father in that video, tired and honest, trying in the end to set one thing right. For years, I thought being the spare daughter meant I was the one people could afford to lose. I know better now. Families will sometimes assign roles so early and repeat them so often that they start to sound like fate. The peacemaker. The failure. The golden child. The difficult one. The strong one who doesn't need anything. But roles aren't truth. They're habits. And habits can wreck a life if no one is brave enough to interrupt them. The question that changed everything in my life came from a stranger in a boardroom. But the answer had been waiting much longer. Who actually kept this family standing? Not the loudest person. Not the most praised one. Not the one everyone expected. The one who stayed honest when dishonesty would have been easier. The one who kept showing up. The one they called spare. If this story resonated with you, let us know your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to hear your perspective. And if you enjoy meaningful stories like this, don't forget to subscribe for more.